All right, hold on. I just need a quick moment to wipe the smile from my face. Okay, right behind me is the 2021 Polaris Slingshot R. This is not a car. And even though the sticker right here says that it's a motorcycle, it's not that either. This strange and audacious three-wheeled vehicle is technically an autocycle. In front of the completely open passenger compartment are two wheels and an engine contained within this outlandish bodywork. Out back, we've got one super wide belt-driven wheel. It's bananas. This thing is bananas. So what the heck is an autocycle? It sounds like a mode on your washing machine. It's basically a legal gray area between a car and a motorcycle. Because this is not technically a car, it's exempt from most automotive safety and emission standards. And in most US states, it's not defined as a motorcycle, so you often don't need a motorcycle license to operate it. The Slingshot was significantly updated in 2020 with a new engine, lots of new features, even more aggressive bodywork, and they finally offered an automatic transmission. And this particular Slingshot is the Slingshot R. It's for pirates. Swab the deck. You've got scurvy, walk the plank, that kind of thing. No, it's actually the performance model in the lineup with more horsepower, a wider rear tire, standard infotainment, additional LED lights, and this flashy sunrise orange paint. When it comes to the styling with its jagged and angular body, there's absolutely nothing else like it on the road. It unequivocally demands attention. People will stop to take pictures. You'll constantly get asked about it. There's nothing about this that's under the radar, but if you're buying a vehicle with a design as unrestrained as the Slingshot, it's pretty obvious that you're the type of person that wants people to look at you. I've found that most onlookers love the design. They love that it's fun, that it looks kind of like a supercar. Now for me personally, I'm used to driving anonymous boxes. I've never really been one to want to draw attention to myself with the looks of my vehicle. And I'll be honest, it's been weird driving around town having people take pictures of me in this thing. And even though I'm on the fence about the styling, especially in the rear, it's clear that people love this thing, even if they have no idea what it is. Now, a lot of you have never driven a Slingshot before, and you might be wondering how long it takes to acclimate yourself to a vehicle like this. Well, you're in luck. I've never driven a Slingshot before this one, so my perspective is that of somebody who is completely new to this world, so maybe you can relate. I'm also someone that doesn't really have much motorcycle experience or really all that much interest in motorcycles. I generally prefer cars, you know, with four wheels, doors, and a solid structure around me. So if you're in the same position as me, hopefully this will provide some insight as to whether or not you would want to actually buy one of these things. So what I'd really like to discover today is this. What is the point of this weird motorcycle car mashup? Now, depending on the jurisdiction, helmets may not be required to operate a Slingshot, but because I've grown to appreciate the soft stuff underneath my skull, even though sometimes it kind of makes me act like an idiot, I'll protect it. I'm gonna put on a helmet today, as you should too. If you don't, you'll likely get pelted in the face with road debris, even with this windshield. All right, let's get this thing out on one of my favorite canyon roads, which happens to be right there. All right, so there's two driving modes on this thing. There's comfort mode and there's slingshot mode. And on a twisty road, I can't ever imagine using comfort mode, right? So yeah, slingshot mode, here we go. Gone is the GM Source 2.4 liter motor, and in its place under the hood is a Polaris designed 2 liter motor with a screaming 8,500 RPM redline. The base Slingshots make 178 horsepower, and it gets bumped up to 203 horsepower in this Slingshot R. peak horsepower is made at 8,250 RPM, and that's something you don't often see, peak horsepower being made right about at redline. 203 horsepower may not seem like very much, but keep in mind this vehicle only weighs 1,650 pounds or thereabouts, so the power to weight ratio, it's really downright impressive. Speaking of weight, most of it is over the front wheels. There's not much weight over that rear wheel, so as you might imagine, even with that huge, enormous 305 size tire, traction can be limited. It can be hard to put the power down. It's super easy to get that rear tire to break loose on launch. Case in point. And when I say break loose, you can completely roast that rear tire. Now, I'm not going to do it here because this slingshot's not mine, and I don't want to completely ruin the tire back there. If you can control the wheel spin on the launch, 0 to 60 can occur in under 5 seconds, but it's kind of hard to do that. As somebody without previous slingshot experience, I initially approached spirited driving with caution because I wasn't really sure what that single rear tire would do. You might imagine that with only one tire in the rear, power-induced oversteer is easy to achieve. And you'd be right. It is a touch more abrupt than a four-wheel vehicle, but once you're in the thick of it, it seems pretty predictable and pretty progressive. The steering's quite good and it tracks well, but you have to realize this thing is a lot larger in the front than you might think it is. It's wider than a C7 Corvette by 5 inches, so watch those yellow lines. After several years of only offering manual transmissions in the Slingshot, Polaris finally introduced an automatic in 2020, and they added paddle shifters. But for a vehicle like this, an automatic doesn't really interest me very much, and that's why I opted for the manual, because I want a little bit more engagement and a little bit more involvement. The gearbox is generally pretty good, it has a decent feel. The pedals aren't really spaced for heel-toe downshifting. I can do it on occasion, but it's not really something that's easy, at least for my feet. There's also no real dead pedal, so there's no comfortable place to put your left foot when it's off the clutch. You just kind of like leave it hanging there. All right, so what about the brakes? That's actually one of the things that I don't like about the Slingshot. They work fine and they feel linear, but the pedal travel is really long, and they feel far squishier than I would prefer when you're braking deep into a corner. Yeah, so to me, the least confidence-inspiring part of the Slingshot, at least on back roads, are the brakes. So one thing that you'll need to remember with two wheels in the front and one centered right in the rear back there, that it's nearly impossible to straddle bumps or imperfections or objects in the road. At speed, on some bumps that would barely upset a car, it can throw you around pretty violently in the Slingshot. But that's all part of the fun. One fantastic benefit of this open-air machine are the sounds that you experience when you're driving it. The roar of the engine, especially at high RPMs. The whining of the gears. There's not much between you and the engine, so it can be quite loud. Once you get used to it, you can have a ton of fun with this thing. I literally cannot stop smiling.
Compared to the previous generation Slingshot, the interior does look more like a car. The seats look fantastic, much nicer than the old seats you got in the previous model. You've also got a leather-wrapped steering wheel, a nice infotainment system, navigation, keyless ignition, and even a super loud Rockford Fosgate audio system. But you'll notice there's no heater. You got Apple CarPlay, but no heater. So that means cold days in the Slingshot could be unpleasant unless you dress accordingly. Heated seats are optional. And I wish this one had them. Even here in Southern California, there have been a few cold mornings, and I would have really appreciated heated seats. These seats look nice, but for me, the seat cushion underneath is not long enough. I'm 6'3" with long legs and kind of skinny, and there's just not enough support for me. I'm constantly sort of bouncing around in the seat from side to side. This seat's definitely made for people that are slightly wider than I am. Now, one benefit of the Slingshot over, say, a motorcycle is that it's a lot easier to take a passenger along with you. Of course, there's not much to insulate you from the noise, so the conversation will likely be limited to yelling at each other. Is this fun?
What did you say?
Yeah, I thought so.
Huh?
What?
I can't hear you.
Yes, it's fun, right? Now, there's actually more storage space in here than I had originally anticipated. You've got a pretty large lock-in glove box and relatively deep lock-in compartments behind the seats. Just enough space for a backpack or a briefcase, though are you really going to be commuting in this thing? There's space up here for your phone, but I'm hesitant to leave anything lying around that I care about should a large bump cause it to exit the vehicle. And of course, no roof or no doors, which means no protection from the elements. And here in Southern California, I don't really have to worry about elements that much, thankfully. If you live somewhere where it rains frequently or snows, good luck. So the lack of roof and lack of doors isn't exactly practical, but it's certainly part of the Slingshot's charm. But if you were to get stuck in a rainstorm, rest assured the entire interior is waterproof, which is pretty impressive. Speaking of the elements, let's talk about wind. Let's talk about rocks. At higher speeds, especially on the freeway, the wind can push your helmeted head around quite a bit. Even with this windshield right here, you are at risk of getting hit in the face with debris. Following my friend Brad in his super rad C4 Corvette, I was getting pelted in the face with pebbles. Motorcyclists are likely used to this, but it's something to keep in mind if you're coming from the car world. But that's just part of having this amazing open air experience. You'll often find yourself looking up and appreciating the panoramic view, especially wonderful on an evening with a beautiful sunset. It really is quite nice. So I know that not everybody in the market for a Slingshot is looking to hustle down a canyon road. So let's head back down to the city for a little bit.
City driving sucks in most vehicles. You've got traffic, you've got red lights, you've got speed limits, you've got countless inattentive drivers. Like this person right here, I'm pretty sure he's eating a sandwich. Most new cars try to insulate you from the dreary dirge that is city driving. They've got loads of safety tech, sound insulation, and touchscreens to distract you. In the Slingshot, you've got a touchscreen and a really nice sound system, but not much else to make city driving palatable. But it's not necessarily the creature comforts that are missing, it's the sense of safety. Sure, we've got more safety gear than a motorcycle. We got seatbelts, structural roll hoops, and electronic stability control. But without doors, a roof, or airbags, you're nearly as exposed as a motorcyclist. To people with a lot of riding experience, that may be a non-issue as you're used to dodging idiot drivers and just overall being hyper aware of your surroundings. You really should be driving defensively in a Slingshot at all times. Assume everybody else around you is an idiot. Modern cars have numbed us from that responsibility. Even with this ridiculously colored, bright orange bodywork, it is still pretty low to the ground, and several times people have cut me off, I'm assuming because they can't see me. I mean, it is Los Angeles and people cut you off all the time, but I think in these particular cases, it was because I'm so low to the ground. So yes, you do have to watch out for affliction shirt wearing dudes in lifted brodozers and chatty Cathys texting from the driver's seat of their Priuses. You're definitely more at the mercy of other drivers' attention level and skill. Now to some, that sense of danger, whether real or implied, is thrilling. But to me, I just want to get out of the city and get to the canyons as quickly as possible. And thankfully, that roaring 2-liter motor under the hood allows me to get to those more fun places very quickly. Now, one place where the Slingshot actually really shines is just cruising. This is the perfect vehicle for Sunset Boulevard in LA or Ocean Drive in Miami, and today I've chosen scenic Van Nuys Boulevard in the San Fernando Valley. Right over there is a adult bookstore, a bunch of closed storefronts, some more closed storefronts. As kind of run down as this street is today, this was the cruising capital of the San Fernando Valley back in the 60s and 70s. Not so anymore. But yeah, pick a nicer street, and cruising in this thing is awesome. Just a slow crawl to let everyone gawk at your ostentatious three-wheeled vehicle. All right, let's get back to those canyon roads.
More than any other vehicle I've ever driven, the stark contrast between the pros and the cons couldn't be greater. The good things about this vehicle are just so good, and the bad things, they could really be deal breakers for some. But that's just what you get from a vehicle that requires some compromises to deliver such a unique driving and ownership experience. Speaking of ownership, that's what I keep asking myself over and over again. Who is this thing for? Polaris came up with a new category, and it's always tough to convince consumers to try something that's hard to define. On the busy streets and freeways of Los Angeles, this vehicle is just not all that alluring to me. But on these canyon roads, this thing is absolutely thrilling, and that's not something I often say about a vehicle. Okay, let's talk price. A manual transmission Slingshot S starts at just about 20 grand. The automatic starts at $21,699. This more powerful and more fun Slingshot R starts at $31,299 for a manual and $33,299 for an automatic. With accessories, you can drive that price even higher. What about the competition? Wait, there's competition for this thing? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Yes, there are other three-wheeled autocycles out there, like the ones built by Vanderhall. They're a bit less ostentatious, but the prices are higher. What about four-wheeled open-air vehicles like a KTM Crossbow or an Ariel Atom? Those are quite a bit more capable, but far more expensive. Okay, what about something like a Mazda Miata? The power-to-weight ratio of a Miata is great, but it's no match for the Slingshot. A Miata is more precise and has near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution, which this Slingshot definitely does not have. And of course, the Mazda has an adherence to car safety standards. On paper, the Mazda is not quite as quick, but in reality, it's a lot easier to put the power down in the Miata. And the Mazda starts at about 27 grand, so prices are in the same ballpark. But I'm not really sure there's much overlap between somebody that wants to live the Slingshot lifestyle and someone that wants just a really great convertible. The Polaris is a lot rowdier and a lot more raw. And even though they provide similar thrills, I can't see many customers actually cross-shopping these two. The Slingshot does really provide a singular driving experience that can't quite be replicated by any other type of vehicle. I gotta say, I went from hating this thing to absolutely loving it, to hating it again, to loving it once again. Never before have I experienced a vehicle that elicited such extreme emotional polarity. Such a fun toy to have on a canyon road. Kind of annoying and questionably safe in city traffic. The freedom of a completely open air experience. Not really much fun to drive in the cold or the rain. But ultimately, aside from being fun on a twisty road, I do appreciate the panoramic view, the connection to the outdoors, to the sky, to the clouds, to the wind, to the moving pavement just off to your side, that all make it such a stimulating and memorable experience. Even the sounds and the smells, you find yourself noticing things that you'd never notice in a car. It may not stir your senses as much as a motorcycle, but not everybody wants a motorcycle. And some people can't ride them. This gets you some of that thrill, but in a new way. There's a sense of occasion and purpose anytime you set out in a Slingshot. There's no question that every driving experience in this thing is gonna be special. What do you think? Have you ever driven one of these things before? Have you ever considered buying one? If not, what would you buy instead? If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon so you can get notified of all my new car reviews, used car reviews, and updates on my fleet of weird and broken 80s and 90s cars. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're well, and see you soon.